Hey everybody, I'm Jim from Pure Wave Audio. Today we are going to be discussing acoustics. For those new to my channel, thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe to it if you like what you see. So today we're talking about acoustics, and recently I did an install for a client, and it's actually really interesting. The client is actually legally blind, but he could see shapes. He can't drive, but he could work on a computer if he's looking right into the screen about 5 inches away, and uses like a 42-inch TV as his single video monitor. Now that he's retired, he wanted to build a studio in his house and have really good gear, kind of do it once and expand if needed later, but for the most part get it all done right out of the gate. So he hired me to put in the acoustics in his room and wire and put everything together like preamps and suggestions to get a workflow that works for him. And as you might imagine, since he's legally blind, having a workflow that's ergonomic and works well for what he's doing was something that is a little bit of a challenge compared to the average client. So I spent some time putting something together, and what's really nice about it is he's really into guitars and bass and keyboards and things like that, but he's not a drummer and he doesn't want to record drums. He knows the limitations of his home studio, and so now I could work with him directly because I'm an actual drummer and I have a recording studio, and so if he needs something he could send it back to me and I could lay drums in for him, and he could also send it back to me and help mix if he needs it, or at least have it mastered. So it's kind of this cool working relationship that will go on for years to come. What we actually ended up installing is Auralex panels, similar to these. A nice beveled edge. This is a 1-inch, this is a 2-inch. And for his situation, he wanted to put some nice colors on the walls and then actually use like a beige or a sandstone type color that would go well with what he was doing. He does have a big rack in his room where there's a lot of guitars, so we're putting absorption behind those guitars because the guitars themselves are acting as diffusion, which is cool, but we wanted to make sure that we had some absorption behind that too, and we wanted to kind of have a pattern go throughout the room and also put a cloud kind of like you see up there. We took some video of the actual installation so you could kind of see what it takes to actually put stuff together and some of the trials and tribulations, and let's take a peek. So right now we have a practice room that we're going to turn into the studio control room. In fact, it's an all-in-one studio, so the live room and the studio control room is all the same. And so we have a lot of guitar amps, we have a bass amp, we even have a PA system, a bunch of keyboards, a couch, even a powered mixing console, part of the PA system. So we're going to make this somewhat of a hybrid, and first thing we have to do is clear out this whole room, and then we have to have it all painted to new colors, anything fixed, and then put in all the acoustics, and then slowly pepper in all the equipment, including a full studio furniture for a console, and go from there. So the first issue that we came across is putting the cloud up. His ceiling has popcorn ceiling, and with a popcorn ceiling, the popcorn is actually kind of in the way of the anchors. Now, originally what I ended up doing was, thinking about it for a while, going and get longer screws with some spacers so they'd be popped off the ceiling a little bit and clear the popcorn. But once we got to the install, we could see that the popcorn really wasn't that thick, and we could put it up just like it was regular drywall. So the way this works is you actually install these clips into the actual insulation of the fabric panel, and then you put a little divot marker, if you will, into it, and then you push that up onto the wall, and that marks a spot. And then if it was a flat wall, you would see 4 marks, and you'd drill your screws into it and the anchors, and then you just pop this thing on there. And in this case, since you have this popcorn wall that looks like random chaos up there, there was no way for us to see the divots with these spikes. In fact, I think in that situation, the popcorn actually was thick enough that we would press on it to try to spike it, and it just wasn't, the spikes weren't long enough to get to it. So we were using tape instead to kind of put it in the area, which was kind of hard to figure out where that was going to be, and that didn't even work as well. And I think we ended up actually putting like a little bit of paint on the tip, so when we pressed it up there, there would be a little red dot or something sitting on the tape for us to see. And so that's how we ended up finally getting these things on the wall. This was the longest process, and of course, you know, Jeff was helping me out, but again, he's legally blind, so you can see he's very able to help and do all sorts of things, and very smart. But he had to, you know, really let me be the eyes and you know, do most of the finesse work. But as a team, it worked out really well. And here's a little conversation about a real cool gig that I did right before I did the install. Strachey?
Yeah.
Oh, he came, and we did 16 songs.
Oh, no kidding.
He was the most professional singer I've ever worked with.
No kidding.
I mean, he ate at a certain time, needed to have a 3-hour break because, you know, he's like, pushing.
Yeah.
So you get stuff into your throat and all that. And nicest guy in the world. But last year I did a show on the same project where it was, so, you know, Barry, Mark Strachey did the album. So you know all these guys. Les Dudek, he played on the album. Pat Travers played on the album. Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush.
Somebody gave me a copy of this. The kid that bought my record collection gave me a copy of this disc. There's this...
Skull?
Yeah.
Muscle and Blood?
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Guy's on the cover with like a denim sleeveless thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the album.
Oh, okay.
So anyways, we got done with that album, and we went to go play a show, and Pat Travers' manager was like, hey, you know, actually Pat was like, hey, I'm free this date if you want to do a date. And it was like 6 months out, and we're like, sure. And I turned to Billy, I'm like, well, why don't we make that the CD release? He's like, perfect. So Barry wasn't available, and the manager was like, well, I got Rudy Sarzo. I'm like, Whitesnake, Ozzy? Sure. You know, so I was like, so it was me, Rudy, Pat Travers. Yeah, it was just a cool gig. Yeah. So as you see here, we're installing a bass trap, and the bass traps are a little bit trickier because you're dealing with, you know, A squared plus B squared equals C squared calculations. You have special angle brackets that you have to put in, and getting the corners of the bass trap to really fit flush against the wall, it really has to go on perfect. So it's kind of a two-man job. Once we get everything aligned up, Jeff would hop on top and I would hop in the very bottom and make sure that we were both going in and down on a 45 angle at the same exact time to get that thing to line up perfectly in the wall. And sometimes we had to move it once or twice. But you don't want to move it too much because you'll actually loosen up the fiberglass that these spikes are going into, and then it becomes sloppy and you can't get it tight against the wall. And lastly, you can see how I'm measuring all the panels to go right below the guitar rack. And so if you could picture, those panels are about the same length as a guitar, and the guitars will be hanging from that big black line in front of those panels, and so you could kind of have this diffusion going around. But all in all, it was a really good install. We were able to get everything nice and clean. And then after we had the acoustics done, it was time to install all the gear. Well, that's it for today's video. To contact me, you could do so at buyit@purewaveaudio.com. We appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button and the notification button down below. And we would love it if you could support purewaveaudio.com by throwing some purchases our way. Create every day, everybody.